Fame, fortune, and failure. Hollywood stars who couldn't survive success. There is a moment, every star knows it, when the world decides you are something extraordinary. The cameras turn toward you. The rooms change when you walk in. Strangers know your face before they know your name. For a brief, blinding period, it feels like proof. Proof that you were right to believe in yourself. Proof that the struggle was worth it. Proof that this, all of this, will last. It doesn't always last. For some, fame doesn't just fade, it dismantles. It takes the very qualities that made a person magnetic, the intensity, the hunger, the refusal to be ordinary, and turns them into weapons pointed inward. Hollywood has always known how to make stars. What it has never mastered is what to do with them when the brightness becomes too much to carry. 3 names, 3 trajectories that climbed to the absolute peak of American stardom, and then fell in ways the industry never fully acknowledged, and the world never fully understood. This is the story of what happened after Hollywood stopped cheering. Early career, Jan-Michael Vincent arrived in Hollywood with something the camera loved instinctively, a physical ease, a sunlit confidence that read as effortless on screen. Studios in the late 1960s signed him fast, sensing they had found the next great American leading man, the kind who could carry an action picture without straining, who looked like the hero before he'd spoken a single line. David Cassidy came from different material. The son of actor Jack Cassidy, he grew up understanding the industry from the inside, which made his own ascent feel both destined and precarious. When the producers of The Partridge Family cast him as Keith Partridge in 1970, they handed a 20-year-old a role that would, within months, make him one of the most recognized faces on the planet. Margaux Hemingway entered public life not through a studio system, but through a magazine cover, a single Vogue feature in 1975 that made her famous overnight, and a $1 million modeling contract that shattered industry records. The granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway, she carried a name that promised greatness and imposed its own crushing weight before she'd filmed a single scene. 3 different doors into the same impossible world. Peak fame. By the mid-1970s, all 3 were operating at a level most performers never approach. Jan-Michael Vincent starred alongside Charles Bronson, built a credible film career across action and drama, and landed the lead in Airwolf in 1984, a primetime CBS series that made him briefly one of the highest-paid television actors in America. The show drew millions of viewers weekly. He was 40 years old, at what should have been the consolidated peak of a long career. David Cassidy's fame during the Partridge Family years was something closer to cultural hysteria. He sold over 30 million records. His fan mail exceeded that received by the Beatles at their American peak. Rolling Stone put him on the cover. Girls fainted at his concerts, not metaphorically, but in documented, reported numbers that required medical staff on standby. He was, for a specific and intense period, perhaps the most beloved young entertainer in the world. Margaux Hemingway transitioned from modeling into film with Lipstick in 1976, a role that generated enormous press attention and seemed to confirm her as a multi-platform star. Her face appeared on the covers of publications worldwide. The industry consensus was clear: she was only beginning. Behind the scenes, what the cameras didn't capture was already there, running underneath everything like a fault line. Jan-Michael Vincent's relationship with alcohol had begun quietly and accelerated steadily through the late 1970s. The industry tolerated it, as it often does, until it couldn't. His behavior on set became unpredictable. The easy confidence that had defined him on screen began to read differently in person, as instability rather than ease. The line between the two had always been thinner than anyone acknowledged. David Cassidy, in interviews given decades later with a candor that cost him something to produce, described the Partridge years not as a golden period, but as a kind of psychological imprisonment. He was playing a character, singing songs he hadn't written, representing a wholesomeness that had nothing to do with who he actually was. The pressure to remain the thing the audience had decided he was, young, unthreatening, endlessly available, became unbearable. Alcohol became the pressure valve. By the time the show ended, the habit was established. Margaux Hemingway carried the weight of a last name that had already claimed her grandfather to suicide, and that the literary world had mythologized into something almost supernatural. She has spoken of feeling inadequate against that inheritance, of believing, somewhere foundational, that she could never be enough. Bulimia, substance use, a film career that stalled after early promise and refused to restart despite her efforts. The gap between the image and the reality widened every year. Studios are not equipped, and have rarely attempted, to manage the interior lives of the stars they build. The machinery of fame produces the image. What happens to the person inside it is considered broadly their own responsibility. The fall. The falls didn't happen at once. They happened the way most long declines happen, gradually, then suddenly, then in the past tense. Jan-Michael Vincent's final years on Airwolf were marked by increasing conflict and unreliability. He was replaced. The film offers narrowed, then stopped. A series of arrests for driving under the influence. A near-fatal car accident in 1996 that damaged his vocal cords and left him with injuries he would carry for the rest of his life. A leg amputation in 2012 due to vascular disease linked to decades of substance use. He died in February 2019. The coverage was brief. David Cassidy's decline was public in a way that stripped him of the dignity the years should have returned. A DUI arrest in 2010, another in 2013, a third in 2014, court-ordered treatment. On-stage moments that his audiences watched with concern rather than joy. The words of songs he had performed thousands of times slipping from him mid-lyric. In 2017, he disclosed a diagnosis of dementia. He died in November of that year at 67, holding the hand of his daughter, having spent his final months telling interviewers that the thing he most regretted was not being present enough for his children. That specific regret, not the career, not the money, not the lost opportunities, tells you something essential about what fame had actually cost him. Margaux Hemingway was found dead in her Santa Monica apartment on July 1, 1996. She was 41 years old. The cause was a barbiturate overdose, ruled most likely intentional. She died one day before the 45th anniversary of her grandfather Ernest Hemingway's death, a coincidence so precise and so heavy that it has never been fully processed by the people who knew her, or by the culture that briefly made her famous and then forgot to pay attention. She had spent her last years attempting to rebuild, working on environmental causes, trying to distance herself from an image the industry had assigned her before she understood what it would mean to carry it. She had not succeeded in being remembered for those efforts. She is remembered, instead, for the fall. Legacy. History has a complicated relationship with stars who couldn't survive their own success. Jan-Michael Vincent's early film work holds up. The craft was real, the charisma undeniable. Airwolf is experiencing quiet rediscovery among a generation who missed it the first time. David Cassidy's music has outlasted the machinery that produced it. His voice, on the best recordings, carries something genuine that the teen idol packaging almost obscured. Margaux Hemingway is increasingly discussed not as a cautionary tale, but as a woman who faced pressures, of name, of image, of an industry that consumed and discarded, that would have broken most people considerably faster. They were not failures. They were people for whom the cost of success was never honestly disclosed. Fame promises everything. It rarely specifies the terms. The cheering, the covers, the contracts, none of it comes with a map for what happens when the noise stops. For Jan-Michael Vincent, for David Cassidy, for Margaux Hemingway. They reached the heights the industry told them to reach. What was waiting up there? That was something no one warned them about. If their stories stayed with you, share this with someone who should hear it. Hollywood makes stars. It doesn't always take care of them.